and I have
Welcome to Media Path. I am Louise Palanker.
And I'm Fritz Coleman.
Today we've got something special for you. It's our friend Steve Mencher reporting on his very recent South by Southwest adventure. Steve took it all in. He's an NPR and PBS reporter who has worked for Carnegie Hall, run his own business called Mensch Media, and created documentaries and podcasts. So let's get right into it and welcome Steve Mencher.
Well, thanks so much. You know, I hope most of your listeners are familiar with South by Southwest. It kind of burst on the scene in everybody's knowledge when it kind of launched Twitter in 2007. And I was all set to go. I was pretty excited in March of 2020. And if you can remember back that far, that's when the world collapsed. Mm-hmm. So wasn't able to go in 2020. They were fully remote in 2021. And everybody was pretty excited that there they were back in 2022. Maybe 100,000 people or more showed up in Austin for this awesome, awesome festival.
Wow. So give us a Twitter bio on South by Southwest. What is it? Where is it? What happens?
Okay. It's in Austin, Texas. It has always been during spring break of University of Texas, Austin. So kind of part of the town clears out, and then people come from all over the world. And there are now kind of three main parts of it. And I've already gone over my Twitter character limit, forgive me. But there's three main parts. There's what they call the interactive or the tech part. There's a fabulous film festival where they have a lot of world premieres and American premieres. And then there's the music festival, which is the thing that more people know. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of bands come from all over the world and coming to South by Southwest, or I'll start to call it South by, because that's what everybody calls it,
right,
is really the thing that a young band wants to go there, and that's where they make their mark.
So was it initially a music festival?
I believe it was initially a music festival, and then the tech stuff started to get hot as Austin became a tech center, mm-hmm. and the film festival became hot, and so all three of those happened kind of all at the same time.
Got it.
You know, a lot of people were discovered at South by Southwest. The White Stripes, Jack White, Amy Winehouse, which is so interesting because she's a Brit, Katy Perry, Janelle Monáe, and Haim, or how do the girl group pronounce themselves?
It's called Haim, but there's two versions, and I think they both pronounce it the same.
And one of the sisters starred in Licorice Pizza this year, so it's a great little incubator for young talent down there. Pretty impressive.
Absolutely. And you know who I discovered this year, and maybe I'm a little late, but Japanese Breakfast, the young woman who fronts Japanese Breakfast, and that's going to be a breakout band. She's really going places, and I discovered her this year at South by Southwest, so there are a lot of discoveries to be made there.
So how much planning goes into it for the attendee? You get there, you've got all of your literature. How do you decide how to use your time?
Well, usually the best thing these days is on an app. So you can scroll through hundreds of things that are happening, and many of them happening simultaneously. If you put a little star next to it, then that'll help you filter. And the next time you come back to the app, all you'll see, if you want, is your pieces that you've starred. And then there's this really cool thing where things that are going to be very popular, what they can do is you get three kind of put me in the head of the line chances. And so three of the things that you really think are super cool that you absolutely can't miss, you've got to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning for the next day. And if you can press the button on time, you can be sure that that's one thing you're absolutely going to see. No one's going to shut you out. So definitely the app these days is really the way to go.
And you know, it's more than a film festival and more than a music festival. It's also a discussion of current topics out of the worldly zeitgeist. And I saw so many interesting ones that I wish I could have seen. And I'll let you sort of give your impression of each of those Did you attend them? Alexis McGill Johnson, who's the CEO of Planned Parenthood, and ironically in the state of Texas, Planned Parenthood has been under siege for so long. Did you get a chance to hear her talk, and how was that?
I was so lucky. This was, one of the things that I knew that I had to go to, because Texas has essentially banned abortion. You guys may know that Oklahoma, where a lot of the Texas folks were going today, as we're taping, has also trying to ban abortion. But yes, Alexis McGill Johnson, and she was interviewed. You guys, I'm sure, are friends with Busy Phillips. Mm-hmm. Busy Phillips was on the stage with her, and really they talked about the fact that Roe v. Wade is going to be on its way out, probably in June. There's going to be an incredible uprising, and she was sad, but she was determined. She feels that Planned Parenthood can lead the way toward the next thing for women's rights, and nobody knows what that's going to be. So I was really honored and pleased to be able to see her at that time at the festival. Yeah.
Wow. And what is the mood? What is the energy? I'm sure that you're initiating and taking part in conversations with your fellow attendees, and here you are in the heart of Texas, and yet you're this bubble of awareness and understanding of what matters on the planet. And so describe the mood for us.
Well, I saw a poll yesterday, and it wasn't the most accurate poll, but it seems like Beto O'Rourke is all of a sudden gaining some steam in his quest to be the next governor of Texas. And this is something that no one in Texas would predict as of today. Certainly even back in March when I was in Austin, people were pretty sure that Beto was not going to make it. He had said some things about guns that voters in Texas would not be happy to hear. But I think the mood in Texas is such that with all of the political stuff that's going on with the governor and the lieutenant governor, that Beto might have a chance now. So Austin has always been the part of Texas that is unique. It's different than any other part of Texas. Some of the people say that Austin isn't really part of Texas, but the fact that Austin exists and the fact that people come there from all over the world really makes a difference. And sometimes you'll hear of something happening in a state, and then there's a big convocation that's scheduled for the state, and people say, we're not going to go because we want to punish the state. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not how they do in Austin. Mm-hmm. In Austin, they say, we're going to go, and we're going to make sure that our voices are heard.
My friend moved to Austin recently, and I said, well, how do you like it? She said, I love Austin. Unfortunately, it's surrounded by Texas. I'm not used to that yet. But they, even though they're in that sort of liberal bubble that is Austin, probably because of UT and its influence, but Texas politics is all part of the discussion down there. Tell us about Mama Bears.
Oh, wow. Well, Mama Bears is just an amazing movie. You've got to keep your eyes open for it. It's a movie about a group of women. They're women of faith. They're women for whom religion is just a super important part of their lives. But they're also women who are supporting their sons and daughters. And some of those sons and daughters might be gay. Some of those sons and daughters might be transsexual. And as part of the run-up to Mama Bears, the folks who put on that film had a demonstration at the state capitol. And I was lucky enough to meet the most beautiful, heroic 11-year-old girl named Kai Shapley. And I'd like for you to hear what she had to say at that rally.
My name is Kai Shapley. My pronouns are her, she, like the candy bar. I'm 11 years old and I'm in the 5th grade. And I live in Austin, Texas. I was with my mom when she got a text that Texas is trying to classify gender-affirming care as child abuse. She started crying, and then she told me, now trans kids like me might not get the care that we need. The Texas governor told child welfare agencies to open child abuse investigations into parents who are providing affirming care to their children. I'm afraid I'll be taken away from my mom. That's the worst thought of all of it. I've been asking adults to make good choices since I spoke out about the bathroom bill 6 years ago. And I'll keep asking them to make good choices. whatever your gift or talent is, please use it to help trans kids like me. If you're a writer, write. If you're a director, make a movie. If your gift is making money, donate funds to the organizations here today. Each one plays a vital role in fighting for trans kids. And if your gift is knowing Dolly Parton, tell her to call me.
So do you have an update on Project Dolly Outreach?
I do not. I wished I had found out whether she was able to get backstage to see Dolly Parton, but I did not hear about that. Luckily, I was able to see Dolly perform at South by Southwest, and that was the coolest thing in the world. She played in the place where they perform Austin City Limits, and I am now the proud owner of a Dolly Parton NFT, which is a little work of art. It's probably worth about a penny. It was number 86 out of 10,000. But Dolly is just super amazing. She's got a new book coming out. She's got an album coming out. They'll be making a movie out of her book. And this was the first time I got to see Dolly Parton, and I'm in love with her. So that was really great. But I hope Kai got to meet her as well.
Steve, I don't want to jump away from Mama Bears. Just to clarify it for us. So these are the parents. These are about the mothers that nurture these children who are different. Kai being one of those children. And
Yes.
so Kai spoke. That monologue that she just did was done
Yes.
at the reveal of this film at South by Southwest. And how did the audience react? And was there any outside negativity because it is Texas? How was that whole thing received?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, the setting for this was in front of the Texas State Capitol. It's a beautiful building, and it's the place where all of these negative, horrible things have happened. But the energy, the spirit that Kai showed, and that representatives from several different groups who fight for gay Texans, who fight for transgender Texans, it was just heartening. And this is one thing. The abortion fight in Texas may now be over. A court has closed off the last avenue, and that might be something that doesn't change right now. But there has been a court order to stop this horrible idea that parents would be criminalized for giving their trans kids life-affirming care, that the kids would be taken away, that they'd be put into the broken foster care system of Texas. And that fight, I think, is still ongoing, and there's a lot of hope that that fight can be won. And Mama Bears is a film that puts that fight front and center and really gives you some hope. I'll tell you about one of the women in that film, the original Mama Bears. She has developed a project where if you are getting married to the man, if you're a man getting married to the man you love and your mom and dad won't come, this Mama Bear will come to your wedding and she will give you the hugs that the mama would give you if your mama would come to the wedding. So that's the kind of really sweet and wonderful film this is that I think everybody should see.
Absolutely. I mean, I really feel strongly that we are meant to spend our lives learning, and we are each responsible for doing better when we know better. And often our worst fear is our fastest pathway towards expanding our understanding. So having a trans kid or a grandchild of color can reveal itself to be a blessing if you just open your heart and your mind.
Absolutely. And these families, the movie's about their journey, because each and every one of these families has been taught by their pastors that the Bible says that this is wrong, the Bible says that is wrong. There's only one way to look at these things. And their children had to teach them, as you say, how to open up to love. And that's what this wonderful Mama Bears film is about.
So do you know where usually things come to festivals and they're not yet in distribution, but do you know where we would be able to find this film?
Right. Mama Bears, yet I'm not sure that they have the distribution. I think they're going to be in your neighborhood cinema and, of course, eventually streaming.
All right, so let's go from there to Dolly, because Dolly is never just Dolly. She's 360 packaging. She's got all aspects of whatever she puts out there. It's never just one thing. So talk about what Dolly is promoting at South by Southwest this Dolly season.
Okay. Dolly is I think she's been listening to the Facebook folks because she's no longer Dolly. She is the Dollyverse. And the Dollyverse has a bunch of stuff coming up.
The Dollyverse. Consider me a citizen.
Yes, exactly. Me too. She has a new book. She and James Patterson got together, sat down, and they wrote a thriller about a young person who comes to Nashville to be a star, and I'm sure there's murder and death involved and all kinds of things. It's called Run, Rose, Run. And that's a book that I think you could order today if you went on to Amazon. If it's not in preview, it's you come to your house tomorrow. So that was the first thing. Then as Dolly started to work on this book with James Patterson, she says, as she was in dialogue with James Patterson at the festival, she said she went home one day and decided that she was going to have to write some songs in the characters of these folks who were in the book, and she wrote an album's worth of songs. So that's also coming. Run, Rose, Run, the album. Then she made an announcement at the festival, which she was very excited about, that Reese Witherspoon had optioned the book and was going to be making the film. So there's Run, Rose, Run, the film. Reese Witherspoon's company is going to be making it, and Dolly's going to be in it. I don't think she's going to be the protagonist, who I think is probably a younger person. And then there was this NFT drop and all of these things. Dolly, one of the things I think when you look at all of these things, for a second you might forget that Dolly has also given away 178 million books in her library, imagination library that she does, and she can get those books to people all around the country. And I had forgotten that Dolly had also given $1 million to help with COVID and to get the COVID vaccines and other things out to the public. So Dolly is all of that and more. And when you're in the presence of Dolly, it's just something that lights you up and makes you feel the way that she is feeling on stage.
She's very humble but has no reason to be. and recently, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame announced that her name is being considered for induction, and she wanted to have her name retracted because she didn't think she deserved to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And they said, "We love you, Dolly. That's not how this works. Your name stays in the mix." So it might be that although she'll be a reluctant winner, and I can't imagine that she wouldn't be, she'll get inducted anyway.
Yes, I'm pretty sure she will. She is someone, the place was full. This place where they record Austin City Limits was full to the rafters. They had a couple of warm-up acts who were sort of forgettable. And then once Dolly hit the stage with her talking to James Patterson and then doing her concert, the place just went wild. It was really fabulous.
Have you listened to the podcast Dolly Parton's America, and do you get the sense that Dolly is a little closer to expressing a political viewpoint, or is she still hoping to remain undeclared?
I have not yet listened to the podcast. I hear it's just fabulous. I know it comes out of WNYC. And in terms of Dolly and her political views, I'm not sure exactly what those political views are, and I think she is careful not to alienate any of her fans who may come from all over the spectrum. But I will tell you that there's another documentary film that they were showing at the festival that I haven't yet seen and that we can keep our eyes open. And it revisits 9 to 5. It's kind of 9 to 5, the sequel. And it talks about the fact that all of those things that were done as comedy about how women don't fare very well in the workplace, those are serious things that we're for the first time starting to understand and grapple with and try to change. And so the fact that Dolly is very much, I know she's interviewed in that film, and I know that in the sense that she is still agitating for women to get a fair shake out in the world of work. In that sense, she's very political, and that being political is very important to her.
I know that you heard Frances Haugen, who is the Facebook whistleblower, too, and I wondered what she had to say and how the audience responded to her.
Boy, the audience was very, very receptive. She talks about the dangers of Facebook. It's not merely that you're scrolling through and it takes you a lot of time and all of that. She talked about how Facebook could be deadly, that the kind of misinformation that's spread by Facebook has resulted in minorities being persecuted in places like Ethiopia and Myanmar. She talked about the fact that Facebook really doesn't care about us, doesn't care about us and our friends. What it cares about is making money. And if it can make money through spreading misinformation and disinformation, she believes that, and she has the goods. She was there. She knows that's what they did, and that's why they did it. So she feels that Facebook needs to be reined in.
Is it your? I was going to ask you that opinion because you've been in the media for a long time. Is it your opinion that ultimately they'll be forced to self-regulate, or it's going to have to be Congress stepping in to provide the template?
I absolutely think that self-regulation is not an option. Someone is going to have to tell Facebook that they have to do the kinds of things that they should have been doing all along. Is good labeling of misinformation and disinformation, of taking down the kinds of disinformation that have resulted in the death of people around the world. Better moderation in languages other than English, which is a terrible problem. Facebook does not nearly have enough people to do the kind of moderation that needs to be done. So all of these things have to happen, and all of them have to happen with some government regulation. And that government regulation, I believe, is coming.
Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, do you think that what can we do to promote the concept that when we are enraged, we need to disengage? Because they understand that the opposite works. They understand that people are more engaged when they are angry. What can we do to spread, just because it's like self-care. It's like we know not to drink and drive. If we just spread the message that when you feel your face start to get hot, walk away from the computer.
And I think, the kind of basic fact-checking that one can do by looking on the internet, by looking for the source of information, I think, Louise, I think that that's really the key to things, is that instead of simply taking something you read or see and spreading it out to your hundreds or dozens or thousands of friends, look and see if that thing that you're spreading is true, is real. And once you've done that, you can say, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be reposting this information to my groups, to my friends, because this isn't real. So I think the very first thing you can do is start to develop the kind of media habits that say, I'm going to check this out before I share it. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that Frances Haugen, very much herself said, this is step number one. And so I'm with her. I believe that.
Well, I think one of the problems is just an aspect of human nature, which is that we are more inclined to believe something if it's in alignment with something we already believe to be true. So I was listening to Serial, the new season of Serial, and it's about something that's called the Trojan horse letter, where a letter arrived somewhere in England that said there's a plot to overtake schools with radical Muslim philosophies that would be militant and dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I think the letter was believed because in Great Britain, there's a tendency to mistrust people of a different race or a different religion or a different color. And the letter was in alignment with what they wanted to believe anyway, which is let's keep England Anglo. And so the letter was believed. And I think the same thing happens to each of us on Facebook when we're presented with something that matches what our core is telling us must be true. And so we just spread it by saying, see, I told you, because we all want to be validated and we all want our fears to be validated. And sometimes it's hard for people to say, I may be looking at this, completely wrong. And in other words, Facebook is, we react to it. We don't stop and process. We just react.
Right. And here's something I learned from Frances Haugen was that there may be 1 to 2 billion people in the world whose only access to the internet is through Facebook. So consider that for a minute, that they have no way to even check the kinds of things that they might read on Facebook because that's their only access to the world outside.
But once the internet understands that rage is our greatest motivator, is the rest of the internet behaving any better than Facebook with their algorithms?
Well, the thing that she brought forward, and I think I know that she studied this, is that some of the rage that's directed against Facebook is the fact that they will not tell us how their algorithms work.
Okay.
If you're interested in how Google spreads information or who's searching for what or how they find it, Google can tell you. You can go in behind the scenes and look at that. The same is true with Apple. Apple's algorithms are open to people that they can see how they work. And so she said the thing that has to happen is that Facebook has to no longer be a black box where all these things are hidden, but they have to open up the algorithms. And if they do that, we would have a good start in figuring out how to better the world.
I was looking at a list of the great music docs that got released at this festival, and the one that I really loved was Jazz Fest, which is the story of the New Orleans Jazz Festival, which is iconic, and it was started by George Wine, who started the Newport Jazz and Folk Festivals, the iconic ones on the East Coast. And I hope that's a good one because I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Oh, I think you will love it. This is a film that's jam-packed with performances. I was reading some reviews of it, and the only negativity I heard about it at all was that there was just so much packed into it. It's a love letter to the Marsalis family, the dad, Ellis Marsalis, and all of his brilliant musical sons like Wynton and so forth. Jimmy Buffett, I believe, is one of the executive producers of this film. There's gospel music. There's a complete history of why New Orleans is at the center of so much jazz and why is this the birthplace of jazz. So I would say if you like this kind of a movie, you will love Jazz Fest, a New Orleans story. And I believe you two both probably know Frank Marshall. He was the one who made this film. He loves the New Orleans Jazz Festival, and it's really a love letter to New Orleans and to jazz.
Did you see the Sheryl Crow documentary?
I did. I had a chance to see it, and she was there. There's something that happens at film festivals where you see a biography of someone and you know that they're involved and you know that it's going to be a slightly sanitized version of the person's life. And so I sometimes come in with that feeling, and yet the Sheryl Crow documentary seemed pretty unvarnished. It talks all about the difficulties that she has had with fame. It talks about the depression that she has had, that sometimes she has had success and then has this darkness descend on her that she has to go past. It talks about her brief encounter with cancer and the horrible relationship that he had that blew up with Lance Armstrong. So in that sense, it really gives a pretty good feeling about who she is, why she's important, and of course there's a lot of just fabulous music. And I learned, which I wouldn't have known, that she came to the public view as a dancer with Michael Jackson, which I thought was pretty funny to imagine her doing that. But then as she tells the story, it takes a kind of a Me Too twist, and it turns out that Michael Jackson's manager was trying to proposition her and tell her that he would help her career if she only did this, that, and the other thing. And so it's really a portrait of our times. and a portrait of a performer who is just sensational. I like the movie. I thought it was well done.
And that is headed for Showtime, correct?
Yeah. She's really happy to have that be on Showtime, and it'll be there this spring.
Awesome. Now, do you ever get a chance to ask questions when you're at any of these events, or are you with the press, or are you with the rest of the population, or how is it organized, and what access do you have to ask follow-up questions?
Well, there's not a lot of access. There's the red carpet at South by Southwest is about 20 feet long or something. So if you want to be on the red carpet, you put in your request. And I was turned down for just about every single red carpet but one. And that's okay with me, because the one that I got to go to was for a film that I think everybody is going to want to see. I don't know if either of you follow the social media feeds of Chef Jose Andres, but he is now in Ukraine. He's been on the Poland border, and he, with his World Central Kitchen, is helping to feed the people of Ukraine thousands and thousands of meals. He's saving lives. They're trying to get, I saw today on his Twitter feed, they're trying to get food into Mariupol. And so this was an opportunity. Now, of course, we would have loved to have seen Chef Jose Andres on the red carpet, but he was in Eastern Europe. So the next best thing was that we got to see Ron Howard, who has directed this film, and it's called We Feed People. And as Ron Howard came toward me, and with his producer Sarah Bernstein on the red carpet, I did have to ask him what he thought of the film and why he had made it, and here's what he told me.
Oh, awesome.
I certainly want to shine a light on World Central Kitchen and what they've been doing. They're gaining more and more profile, but they're still a very new NGO, and they're moving into different facets of society, policy making, and things like that. I really hope that it's kind of an object lesson in what individuals can do. The difference that they can make when they get organized. And yes, there's that kind of alpha leader, unbelievably charismatic, Jose Andres, passionate, but the film is not essentially just about him. It's also about, what so many people gain from this by engaging, what they achieve through their engagement. And so I hope that is a kind of also a call to action for people to participate.
Okay, have you heard anything on the ground from Eastern Europe, from Jose and his group there?
Actually, Nate Moog, who is the CEO of World Central Kitchen, just flew into Austin from over there. So they are, as the world is sort of paying attention to them, they are incredibly active right now.
And Ron, one last question. Tell me, there's been a lot of talk about the future of food and how food works on the planet. Do you see this as fitting into that question?
It very much fits into the question, and Chef Jose talks about it. We broach it in the film. It's in the very nascent stages of him trying to say, look, we're thrilled to be able to help out in a crisis, but there's an even larger sustained problem, and that is hunger. And let's talk about addressing that too. And so I think that's next on the agenda in many, many ways.
Awesome. And then you got to talk to Nate.
Right. Once I found out that he had just been with Jose Andres in Poland and Ukraine, I was really eager to ask him what was going on the ground there. And here's what he had to say.
So we've got teams all along the border providing tens of thousands, I think over 100,000 meals a day now. We've got teams within Ukraine as well. I was in Lviv and in Odessa. We're just trying to get food out to folks that need it right now. We are trying to set up supply across the country. We're working with restaurants all across Ukraine and just feeding people during this really difficult time of, their country's under attack, their country's being invaded, and, it's the people are standing up to defend themselves.
Okay, tell me what you hope people come away with after seeing this film.
Yeah, this film is a really valuable and important way to see behind the scenes of World Central Kitchen's work and the history of where we came about and the vision. And so I hope people learn more about our work and also at the same time get inspired to get involved. It's not magic. You can show up, get boots on the ground, and just get your hands dirty, right, and start doing something. And so I hope that inspires folks to do that, to know that they too can play a role. Thank you so much.
So did he take a posse of people over there to do this work, or did he hire people in Ukraine and Poland and elsewhere?
That is the exact right question. They learned when they were in Puerto Rico and other places where they have gotten the idea of what they want to be doing, that what they need to do is collaborate with people who are there on the ground. And the story they told was that, I think when they were in Haiti, they were serving this bean dish that Jose Andres used to love to serve in all of his restaurants. And the women in Haiti said, this isn't the way beans should taste. And they got out a mortar and pestle, and they got them such that they were exactly the way the people in Haiti liked them. Mm-hmm. And as soon as Chef Jose saw this, he figured, I need to change the way we do business. When we come into a country, we need to collaborate with the restaurateurs. We need to collaborate with farmers. We need to collaborate with people on the ground in these places. And when we do that, we're going to be so much more effective. And that's exactly what they're doing in Ukraine. Hundreds and hundreds of people who run restaurants and are in the food business are working with them to make sure that people in their country don't starve.
Wow. So let's talk about some of the other films. You saw the Magic Johnson movie, or is it going to be a limited series?
That's a limited series. That's really cool. It's going to be 4 parts. They played the first part. And, in Southern California, of course, you guys are so familiar with Magic Johnson. But when he came out on stage afterwards, and, he starts to say, oh, well, I own this percentage of the Dodgers, and I'm bringing a new soccer team, and I started out by owning movie theaters. And, he is a guy who touches things, and they become magical. And he's also a person who's been living with HIV for all of these years and is a super healthy and really forward-looking person. And this 4-part series is going to talk about all of that, and that's going to be on Apple.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I just retired a couple of years ago from 40 years in the news business. And people, when I do question and answer periods at the end of speaking engagements, people always ask me, how do you stand all the tragedy all the time? And what was the worst moment in your career for tragic news? And I say, hands down. Now, I lived through 9/11, the O.J. Simpson thing, catastrophic brush fires, killer mudslides. I said the single saddest day in the newsroom was the day that Magic announced that he had HIV. It literally sucked the oxygen out of the newsroom. Now, these are grizzled people who have learned how to incorporate bad news into their lives, but it knocked the wind out of the news business, and I will never forget that. And that's when I realized how important a figure he was.
I mean, yes. He's the first really person of note who showed us that you can live with HIV.
Absolutely. And he is, talks about how Anthony Fauci is a hero and a friend of his and really held his hand through those early treatments. And this is, he wanted to make sure, I think, before he was finished with his they showed the first part of the documentary. And when he was done, he got up on stage and talked about it. But he didn't want to let that go unrecognized, that this is something he's lived through. The whole part of Los Angeles has lived through it with him. The country has lived through it with him.
Do you think that he was one of the first people to get experimental treatment, and that's why he thrives today?
I think the experimental treatment when he was getting it was still experimental, and he was certainly one of the first, yeah.
Wow, and it's been a beacon.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Gabby Giffords.
Man, talk about heroes, 11-year-old Kai Shapley and Magic Johnson, and then there was Gabby Giffords who came to the documentary about her. She was supposed to be on the red carpet, and I was told afterwards that they yanked the red carpet away from that film because Gabby Giffords, they show in the film how the bullet that went through her brain and through her skull destroyed the part of her that makes it easy for her to have a thought and then to express that thought in language. Sort of like Bruce Willis with his aphasia now. They talk about aphasia with Gabby Giffords, and that part of her brain that used to be able to do that is no longer operating. So if she wants to answer a question, you have to give her the question beforehand, and she'll memorize the answer, and she'll give it to her. And the bravery that she shows through the course of this film, starting with her career and then with this horrible event that happened and killed several people and changed her life completely. And then at a certain point when she was having her operation, it shows her husband up in space right when that was happening. And they talk about a long-distance relationship. This is one for the ages. But they are wedded at the hip. They believe that they can make a difference in gun violence in this country. And here was a little bit of good news. I know we're always eager for the tiniest bit of good political news. The fact that even though federal gun legislation is stalled, when the Giffords organization goes state by state, they are able to have some states make sensible gun control legislation for background checks, for ending the gun show loophole. So they're feeling like there is some hope now that they can make a difference in the gun situation in this country.
I hope her husband continues to be successful in the wackiest state other than Florida, which is Arizona. He's bucking some headwinds out there, but he does such wonderful work, and I hope he has a long career.
Yes, and the filmmakers who made the film about her, you may be familiar with them from the RBG film.
Yeah.
It's Julie Cohen and Betsy West, and they're just very accomplished filmmakers with a warm and wonderful heart. And one of the things they show in this film is Gabby Giffords, who I did not know was Jewish, preparing for her bat mitzvah. So here's something that you might not know unless you see the film. It was made by CNN and Time and Storyville, and I expect it'll be in theaters and also on CNN.
Let's talk about another Texan, Richard Linklater. I just love his movies.
Oh, man, I
Dazed
do
and
too.
Confused, School of Rock. And I think one of the great unsung films, not only for him as a director, but for Jack Black as a performer, was Bernie. I love that movie so much, but it got very little attention. It was a spectacular acting job, played by a man who was, and I use this term very, very gently, but it sort of describes his physical characteristics. He played it slightly fey. There were feminine qualities to him. And when you know who Jack Black was, I just thought it was so understated and not a cartoon, and he was brilliant. And I was so surprised that I thought he's going to get an Oscar for this. Anyway, that's my personal thing. But
no, I thought he was fabulous. What I remember for that is the walk that he developed.
Yeah.
Just had this walk was kind of lighter than air.
Right.
Brilliant movie. And you'll be pleased to know that Jack Black is back working with Linklater on the new film that debuted last week on Netflix. It's called Apollo 10.5, A Space-Age Childhood, and Jack Black is the narrator of this film, narrating it as the child who has grown up. And I'll just tell you one part of the scene here. This young boy, 10, 11-year-old boy, he's playing on the schoolyard. He's playing kickball. And there's two guys who are looking, maybe they look like maybe they come from the government. They've got jackets and ties on and everything. And they call him over afterwards and they tell him, this is all animated, by the way, and they tell him that the government has made a mistake, that the lunar lander, which is supposed to test whether or not they can bring the folks to the moon that summer of 1969, they made a mistake and they made it too small. And so, he has got to go into the lunar lander. He's got to be trained. He's got to go to the moon and back. And he's not allowed to tell anybody about this. He's not even allowed to tell his own family. And this is the setup of the film. And in the meantime, when they start doing this moon stuff, it's also about the growing up in the 1960s. And so it has every board game, every television show, every song that the two of you, I don't know, you might remember those days. I know I do.
We might.
And it'll bring you back. It's just a fun thing that you can get if you have Netflix. Just watch it right now. Watch it tonight.
Describe the style of animation, Steve, because I just found it very engaging. It almost looks like they had actors and then they drew over them.
Well, it's different. The last animated film he did was exactly what you're describing. In fact, they did use actors, and it was that kind of animation. With this, these are fully drawn characters and backgrounds. And what's interesting to me is that in order to do this kind of animation, which involves thousands and thousands and thousands of backgrounds and characters and everything, they had the work done all over the world. So there were teams in the Far East, there were teams in Amsterdam, there were teams in the United States, and all of these things came together. And yes, it absolutely looks, especially with the lighting and everything, it looks like these are things that happened in real life and then they somehow made them into animation. But it's a little different than the kind of animation that starts with real pictures and then turns those into animated characters.
But there's so much detail of expression. And if, let's say it's a car scene, if you look at every person in the car, they each have a different expression. They're reacting to the same thing in their own, based on their own personality. It's so specific. There's so much detail when you talk about all the board games and all the TV shows and all the albums. Even when they put a Capitol record down, it's the Capitol logo. There's just, people are going to watch this over and over again.
I know, and again, to me, the lighting, the simulation. You're saying people in a car. Mm-hmm. The person in the driver's seat might have a light coming at him from a certain angle. Person sitting in the back has a light coming at them from a different angle. And every time there's that change of expression or change of lighting, it's done brilliantly. It's just a fun movie.
Well, I think one of the great heroes of the fight for First Amendment rights around the world is a Filipino journalist. She's a Nobel Prize winner, Maria Ress. She's fighting against what happens when we let authoritarianism go to seed, which is the Duterte regime over there. She was in jail. And I saw a documentary about her. I don't know if it was on Netflix, but it was so compelling. And I thought there are very few journalists in the world that have put themselves in harm's way like Maria has to fight against and fight for freedom of the press and against totalitarian treatment of the media in these various countries. And she was there to speak, correct?
Well, she was there virtually.
Via Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, what had happened, and she explained this to us, was that she needed 7 approvals in order to get onto a plane and come to Texas. And the way the government worked it, they gave her the 6 approvals, and she got to the airport. She was supposed to get that 7th approval, and they waited till the last plane that could have brought her to Austin had left.
The Filipino government?
Yes. Until she got her last approval. So she was there, and she is the kind of a brave person who is willing to risk her life to stand up to this murderous dictator. And after Duterte goes, and I don't know if it's that he has made a choice or if he's somehow term limited, it turns out that it looks most likely that the Marcos family is coming back to power.
Please.
And
Shoes will be back in fashion.
Ferdinand Marcos is the likely next president of the Philippines, someone who seems like he's okay with the kind of murderous regime that Duterte has. She had also is worried about social media in the same way that Frances Haugen is. And she name-checked a book that I need to go and check out of the library. Has a very clever name. It's called Weapons of Math Destruction. And I'm not lisping. It's Math Destruction, and it's by Kathy O'Neill. And it's all about how social media kind of turns us into Pavlov's dogs and as a behavior modification system. And she is very worried that social media is being turned by tyrants into something that really is very negative in our world.
So what did she talk about? The collapse of press freedom in authoritarian countries and stuff like that? I hope so.
Yes, and very much so. And she talked about, she kept on quoting back from her Nobel Peace lecture about very much the rise of the strong man in the world, and the fact that without a free and fair media, that there is no check on people like Duterte, on people like Putin, on people like some of Orban in Hungary, who may finally be moving a little closer to us after he sees what his friend Vladimir Putin is doing in Russia. So her talk was about how the media can and should and must be a check on this authoritarian impulse.
And here you are at an event that could not be replicated in the Philippines, could not be replicated in Russia, and we have to hold on to our rights to be able to express ourselves through our arts.
Yes, absolutely. And that was, there was a lot of talk about the media and what's the future of media, the future of democracy. You asked about the feeling there. Yeah. There is definitely a feeling among the people in the media, at least, that our democracy is very much up for grabs. If 45 becomes 47, we will be in a lot of trouble. And that is something that people at South by Southwest very much felt and feel. And they feel like the only check on that is a strong media in our country and in places like the Philippines, where Maria Ressa is willing to risk her life to tell the truth.
You being a journalist, I'm interested in your answer to this question. Looking back over the Trump administration and what we've seen about the January 6th investigation, what do you think about the way the media has performed? I think the Washington Post and the New York Times have sort of reinvigorated the importance of print media and done a spectacular job in both their daily spot news coverage and their investigative work, done an unbelievable service for the United States, and thank God they're there.
No, I certainly agree with you there, but the thing I'll say that is perplexing is that we can't really know what's happening behind the scenes. And so the idea that there's a lot of anger now, especially in progressive circles, that is directed at the Department of Justice. Mm-hmm. Why aren't they doing enough? Is the president doing enough to push Merrick Garland at the Department of Justice toward investigating the kinds of things that went on January 6th? But it's the kind of balance that none of us wish we would have to make ourselves, because the balance is such that President Trump, with his attorney general, made the Department of Justice into a plaything. And so whatever the Department of Justice now does in holding people responsible for January 6th, they have to do it with the utmost independence. But, I'm not answering your question. The answer to that question is we can't always know. The media does not always know what is happening and how it's happening and what happens behind the scenes. And the best they can do, and what excites me about what you just said, is that there were things like, I remember the day the New York Times and some of the other media came out with the frame-by-frame picture of some of the things that they had been able to piece together from cell phone videos and from other things that had happened on January 6th.
Right.
And because of that, we know what has happened. And this kind of technique was used just yesterday by the Washington Post, by analyzing frame by frame what happened in Bucha, in Ukraine. They were able to prove that none of this happened after the Ukraine army took over, but it had happened while the Russians were there. So these kind of techniques that are being developed today by the media, as you say, by the Times and the Post and by many other members of the media, to do a new kind of analysis, to do a new kind of looking at the way we see the world by using data and by analyzing that data. That's a really great thing that's happening right now.
And what's great about that, Steve, is that they can counter Putin's argument that this was a false flag operation by the Ukrainians, and doing that frame-by-frame analysis, and they have the satellite pictures, plus all the reporters from CNN and MSNBC and the others on the ground there. They can sort of triangulate this stuff and say, no, it's not a lie, it's the truth. So I agree with you.
Talk about one more film before we get to Willie Nelson, which you have to.
Sure.
Willie Nelson has to be your closer. He can't open. But talk about Bad Axe.
So, documentary films count on what we call, for shorthand, access. Mm-hmm. You can't make a documentary film without the people who are in it feeling comfortable with you telling their story. And so in Michigan, it really is a town called Bad Axe. Oh. And they claim that maybe a rusty axe was found at some time in the town's history in the 19th century. But as COVID closed the world down, a filmmaker, I believe his name is David Reef, you'll have to check me on that, but he's Cambodian-American filmmaker, came from New York and said, I'm going to go home to Michigan and I'm simply going to document how my family's restaurant stays afloat. And this restaurant is just a warm story of a family that started out with a donut shop and then a sort of a diner and then was able to make a big success of its restaurant. And he was going to see, what happens there. Is the family able to hang on by their fingernails when restaurants are closed? What do they do to make money? How do they survive? And in the middle of making the film, again, what we hope as documentary filmmakers, there was the twist. And our president, who we're talking about far too much today, said that the coronavirus pandemic was the fault of people from China and people from Asia. And because of that, anti-Asian violence in our country exploded. And so this filmmaker, who was with his family in the middle of Michigan, was able to document how the violence against his family almost closed their restaurant and almost ended their dream of being a success in America. And of course the added emotional impact of this comes from the fact that the father of this family had survived the killing fields of Cambodia, the most awful genocidal craziness of any country, in the 21st century, in the late 20th century, after, of course, what happened in Europe in the 40s. And after surviving that, this family almost was not able to survive the kind of anti-Asian madness that gripped parts of our country in these past 2 years. And the sequel, I think, is that the family did survive. They were able to pull through. But this is a film, I don't know exactly where you'll be able to see it, but keep an eye open for Bad Axe. Excellent. It won the Audience Award for Best Documentary, and it's just a tremendous film.
All right, well, we will definitely look out for that. And I think we need to talk about Willie Nelson. Everyone needs a hug.
I've been to South by Southwest maybe a total of 4 times. This might be my 4th or 5th time.
Okay.
And I had always heard these rumors that Willie, in the middle of the festival, would call up his friends. They would all show up on the ranch, and some of them would play music, and it'd be so much fun. And, of course, this was an invitation that no mortal could ever expect to get. And so I was thinking, oh, well, this is just something I won't be able to tell my grandkids. But I started to look into it when I got there. And it turned out that my dream of this had been a little bit of a fantasy, and that in fact Willie out at the ranch had a paying concert that folks with several $100s or who were lucky enough to score a press pass could go to. And Willie's ranch is about 30 miles outside of Austin. When he made Red-Headed Stranger partly on this ranch, they built an old Western town kind of movie set that's still there to this day. And you can see the chapel, and you can see the saloon, and you can, all of that stuff is still there. And, they sell these tickets expensive so that not too many people can come. And it's a day of music and fun. And, I heard people who I had only barely thought, well, are these people still around? The Lost Gonzo Band, who had some hits way back in the 60s. And Michael Martin Murphey showed up to sing Pony Named Wildfire.
Oh, my God.
And there was that Japanese breakfast band who is just really hip right now. And, I don't know how much you've read lately, but there was a sad note that the week before this lovely gathering, which they call the Luck reunion, Willie's older sister at 91, Bobby had just passed away.
Yeah.
And there was some thought that was Willie really going to get out on stage and be able to perform when the sister who he loved so much, who's just 3 years older than he is, had just passed away. And so when he got out there with his sons to play, there was a lovely projection on the back wall that remembered her and her birth and death dates, and it was kind of in her shadow that they played. If you've heard Willie lately, he's not got too much voice left, and yet his sons, when they sing, sound, both of them, like a young Willie Nelson. Mm-hmm. And they also have the Willie vibe, so one of them had written a song kind of in honor of Willie's old tune that he wrote, Roll Me Up and Smoke Me When I'm Gone. The son had written, his song was, If I'm high when I die, I'll be halfway to heaven. And of course the second part of that is, or else it'll be a long way down. So this was just, there was a full moon that night, just about. It was March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. And the feeling of Willie's Ranch is that these are Texans. These are people who are from Texas. The feeling of South by is that these are people from all over the world who are taking part in a world festival. Mm-hmm. And so to have the opportunity to take part in both of those was really something that I won't soon forget.
Wow, that is really magical. I'm so glad that you got to experience that. And one thing you should notice that Bobby she played with him. He would always call her a more gifted musician than him, actually. And they grew up together. And, I've read his autobiography, and I highly recommend that if you're interested in Willie Nelson. And it's just kind of like, since he's kind of always just very soft-spoken, you get, when you read his book, what a badass that he truly is. And that's how he was able to manifest this life of his, just by sheer will and determination and confidence. This is a guy who knows what he's capable of doing and goes out and does it.
Yeah. Boy, it was just lovely to be in his presence. And, there's always the rumor that starts, is Dolly going to show up? Or Bob Dylan might have been in the area. It keeps you there till the end. And so it took me an hour to get my car out of the parking lot, but I didn't care. I put everything that I had just heard onto my playlist, and I just sat there listening to music, and eventually got home around midnight. It was just fabulous.
What a great memory for you to have. Well, we just want to thank you so much, Steve, for joining us and sharing all of your adventures with us.
You're such a wonderful storyteller, Steve. Really, it was very compelling.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I'm big fans. I hope you both know. And I really, this was something that I have been looking forward to for a while. So
Thank you
thanks for
so
having
much.
me on.
Well,
I
next
really
year we're
appreciate
going
it.
to South by with you. Yeah. All right. Let's book early.
Okay.
All right, here come your closing credits. We would love for you to join us online on Instagram and Twitter. We are at MediaPathPod, and on Facebook, where our show page is MediaPath Podcast, and our Facebook group is MediaPath with Fritz and Wheezy Podcast Community. You can find full episodes with all kinds of bonus visual content on our YouTube channel, MediaPath Podcast. We would love to know what media you have been enjoying. You can contact us at our social media or email us at mediapathpodcast@gmail.com. You can also go on Apple Podcasts and give us a wonderful review. We would greatly appreciate it. We want to thank our guest, Steve Mencher. Our team includes Dina Friedman, Francesco Damanda, John Maddox, Sharon Bellio, Bill Filipiak, Thomas Hubble, Mason Brown, and you. Our theme music is by me and John Maddox. I am Louise Palanker here with Fritz Coleman and Steve Mencher, and we will see you along the media path.
That was just wonderful.
You're so dynamic.
Oh, well, thank you guys. I certainly thought we wouldn't be talking this long.